What would you do if the hedges you spent nearly a decade shaping with your own hands were hacked down overnight, not by vandals, not by careless kids, but by your very own HOA? For one man, the answer didn't come in the form of words, it came in concrete, block by block, until his defiance could no longer be ignored. If you're loving what you see, go ahead and smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome stuff coming your way. The morning felt wrong from the start. Not because of birdsong or the hum of traffic a few blocks away, but because of the silence that clung to Terrence Holt's property. For years he had grown used to the soft green barrier of his hedges, tall and thick enough to mute the neighborhood and carve out his own private pocket of peace. But when he stepped onto his porch that morning, coffee still warm in his hand, the air felt exposed, wide open in a way that twisted his stomach. He froze at the sight before him, the long line of hedges that had taken him almost 10 years of watering, trimming, and patient shaping now lay butchered to the ground. They weren't trimmed, they were savaged. Jagged stumps jutted from the soil like broken teeth, leaving his yard naked to the street. Terrence's hand trembled around his mug. His sanctuary, his shield from the world, the one thing he had always controlled, was gone. Who would do this? He muttered under his breath, his voice cracking with disbelief. The neighborhood around him carried on as though nothing had changed. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns. A jogger passed with earbuds in. A delivery truck stopped 2 houses down. Nobody seemed to notice that his backyard sanctuary had been torn apart overnight. But to Terrence, it wasn't landscaping, it was personal. He set his mug down on the porch railing, stormed down the steps, and walked the line of ruined hedges. He crouched, running his hand across one of the fresh stumps, the wood still damp. Whoever had done this hadn't even cleaned up. Bits of leaves and branches littered his grass like discarded bones. Rage swelled in his chest, but confusion followed close behind. No notice, no letter, no warning. He paid his dues like clockwork, never parked on the street, never left his bins out, never picked fights. So why him? A voice carried from the sidewalk. Terrence, you see what happened? It was Raymond Briggs, his neighbor across the street, a retired firefighter with steady eyes and a cane. The older man shaded his face, shaking his head slowly. They got to you too, huh? Terrence straightened. There, you know who did this? Raymond crossed the street, lowering his voice like a man sharing a secret with the wind. Klein, Deborah Klein. She's been on a tear lately. Said your hedges were over 6 feet. Said she warned you. Terrence's jaw dropped. Warned me. I never got a single letter. Raymond shrugged. That's her way. She doesn't bother with paperwork. Thinks she is the law. The name made Terrence's blood run hot. Deborah Klein, the clipboard sheriff, the board member who patrolled the neighborhood as though every blade of grass answered to her. He had seen her snapping pictures of trash bins, measuring lawns, lecturing people about mailboxes, but cutting down hedges without so much as a knock. That wasn't oversight, that was trespassing. A pit opened in his stomach. He felt exposed, standing on his own property without the shield of his wall of green. Raymond sighed, leaning on his cane. If you fight back, she'll double down. She'll threaten fines for wind chimes last month. Wind chimes. Terrence shook his head, trying to steady his breathing. He wasn't a man who lost control. Years as an electrician had taught him patience, taught him how to handle setbacks with calm. But this wasn't a work site, this was his home. I'm not letting this slide, he said finally. Raymond nodded but warned, be careful. She knows that rule book better than anyone. Terrence looked at the wreckage again, bits of green strewn across his grass like a battlefield. No, this wasn't over. By late morning, his decision was made. He marched to the HOA office, not some grand downtown building, but a converted clubhouse room by the pool where Deborah sat with her mountain of documents. She looked up the moment he entered, her lips curling into that tight smile of someone who thinks they've already won. Mr. Holt, she said, voice smug. I wondered when you'd come by. He stopped in the doorway, his tone low but steady. Why did you cut down my hedges? She laced her fingers together and leaned back. Let's be clear, I didn't personally take clippers to them. I had a crew handle it. They exceeded the 6-foot limit. That violates the bylaws. I never got a warning. Not a letter, not a word. Terrence shot back. Her voice sharpened, rehearsed. We don't need multiple reminders. I gave you verbal notice 2 weeks ago. Terrence's jaw tightened. No, you didn't. And even if you had, that doesn't give you the right to trespass on my property. Deborah's smile spread smug, not kind. Mr. Holt, the HOA enforces community standards. Uniformity protects property values. Hedges that tall make the neighborhood look like a fortress, and that's not the image we want. Terrence's voice rose. That was my yard, My property. You had no right. People passing outside slowed, ears tilting toward the tension. Deborah, always aware of an audience, lowered her voice to something falsely sweet. If I let one violation slide, others follow. Sheds in the front yard, satellite dishes on roofs. It's a slippery slope. Terrence took a step closer, his voice sharp. Don't talk to me about slippery slopes. Talk to me about respect. You trespassed and destroyed what I built. That isn't enforcement. That's arrogance. For a moment, silence fell heavy in the room. Deborah shuffled her papers, retreating into her armor of bureaucracy. If you have a complaint, she said finally, file it formally. But the Hedges are gone. That's final. He knew he wouldn't get more out of her today. Not here. Not with her hiding behind her clipboard. On the walk home, neighbors glanced, curious whispers trailing him. Raymond met him by the mailbox. You talked to her? Yeah, Terrence said bitterly. She doesn't see a problem. Says it's about rules. But this isn't about rules, it's about control. He looked at the bare stumps, a strip of yard that once gave him peace. This isn't over. Raymond tilted his head. What are you thinking? Terrence's eyes narrowed. He didn't answer, not yet. But in his mind, the image was already forming something stronger than Hedges, something no one could hack apart in the night. That night, Terrence barely slept. By 3 in the morning, he was at his kitchen table with a notepad, scribbling options. File a complaint. Pointless, she was on the board. Hire a lawyer. Expensive and slow. Replant hedges. She'd just cut them again. He crossed out each option. What he needed wasn't another hedge. What he needed was something solid. Something permanent. Something untouchable. A wall, not wood. Not shrubs. Concrete, 6 feet tall, unmoving. A line no one could cross. By dawn the idea had settled deep in his chest. He brewed coffee, sat on the porch, and stared at the ruined hedge line. The wall wasn't just a replacement, it was a statement. Later that morning Raymond ambled over. You look like a man with a plan. I do, Terrence said, cracking a small smile. I'm building a wall. Raymond raised his brows. A wall like cinder blocks. Exactly, Terrence replied. She can cut plants. She can't cut concrete. Raymond chuckled. That'll rattle her. Good, Terrence said. It's time she learned there are lines she can't cross. The very next afternoon, Terrence drove to a construction supply yard and loaded his truck bed with stacks of cinder blocks, bags of mortar, and a new trowel. When he returned, heads turned, neighbors paused, mid-lawnmower kids on scooters slowed. By the time he'd neatly stacked the blocks in his driveway, Raymond had already set up a lawn chair, cane resting across his lap. Well, Raymond grinned. You sure know how to get people talking. Terrence wiped sweat from his brow. Let them talk. I'm tired of letting her decide how things run. As dusk fell, he stood staring at the stacks. He could already see the wall rising in his mind, straight, solid, undeniable. The next morning, as he mixed mortar for the first row, Deborah's car rolled past. She didn't stop, but her glare spoke volumes. He met her eyes, then calmly returned to his work. That was all the declaration he needed. And as the blocks rose, so did the tension. By Saturday, the wall was knee-high. Neighbors gathered in hushed circles. Some supported him quietly. Others frowned. Raymond, of course, provided commentary from his chair. Every block you lay, you're laying down the law. He chuckled. By afternoon, Deborah herself appeared, heels clicking against the pavement. Mr. Holt, she called sharply, do you think this fortress is appropriate for our community? Without looking up, Terrence placed another block, more appropriate than cutting down a man's property without permission. Her jaw tightened. You're creating an eyesore. This isn't harmony. Terrence chuckled. Funny you didn't care about harmony when you butchered my hedges. Neighbors pretended to water lawns but lingered close enough to hear. Deborah noticed, softened her tone. Terrence, stop before this gets out of hand. He met her eyes. You had your say when you cut my hedges. This is my say, and I'm not stopping. For the first time, Deborah faltered. She spun on her heel and stormed away. Raymond let out a laugh. She's going to lose her mind watching this wall. Terrence only wiped his hands. Good. Maybe she'll think twice next time. And so the Battle of Hedges became the Battle of a Wall. A fight not just between two neighbors, but for the soul of an entire community.